Hey Fusion beginners, at the end of this tutorial, you're going to be able to create this door hinge with multiple parts that's ready for 3D printing. We're going to go into how to sketch, how to use dimensions and constraints, doing extrusions, mirroring, and doing assembly with joints coming up. If you'd like to follow along today on the exercise, go up to Insert and find Insert McMaster-Carr and search for this number 1849A62. Select Product Detail. Scroll down and you can find this drawing, and this is what we'll be referencing. So we'll start a brand new design file in Fusion, and now what we want to do is create this design, right? So just a little bit of thought first. We could start by sketching this shape and extruding it down and then adding this round boss as a separate profile. We could also try sketching this profile and extruding that out. I think this is what I'm going to try first. So I've actually tried both, and this one was a little bit easier for me. So let's try that style today. First thing I'm going to do, because I'm doing an assembly, right, in Fusion, or I think of multiple parts, right? So I'm going to do a new component, and that's the component I'm going to build the first design or first part in. First thing we're going to do is start a sketch. Before I do that, my settings, I don't have the grid turned on, but that's where you can turn on your grid settings if you'd like that for the sketching. And also there's some great preferences you'll want to know about. I'm going to link out to this interface video that I did explaining how to get set up as a beginner and as a new user in Fusion. First thing, document settings. I'm going to make sure that this is set right. I'm going to set mine to inches. We're in a new component. You can tell we're working on it because it has a little dot next to it and it's active. We're going to be working in the design workspace. You can see your other workspaces like simulation and cam and manufacture. What I'm going to do is start a sketch. Select the sketch toolbar. Select the front plane. For sketching, you always need to be on a face or a plane. So first thing, I'm going to just start sketching a shape. I'm going to sketch this rectangular shape. And I could use the rectangle. That'd actually be a little bit smarter. So I'm going to select it and do rectangle. So I'm going to use the S for search. Find my rectangle. This is a modal toolbar. It's sensitive to what you're in. So we're in a sketch. So my favorite sketch stuff shows up, as well as the search helps me find what I care about without having to go search through it through all the menus. So I'm going to do a rectangle. From the origin, use the origin when you start just because it puts your planes there and it helps you define the sketch. So I'm going to type this in, but I'm going to do 0.134 and then hit tab and put in the value. Great. So we've got this rough shape drawn. Now we need a circle. And I actually don't know for sure where it goes yet. I don't know if that center point is down below or above. I don't have a dimension in the drawing. Referencing that from the model is actually 0.031. They didn't put that in the drawing, but I went and got that for us. So there we go. We've got that distance. I actually don't want a dimension to this edge. I'm going to delete that, or I could replace it and put it to a different point or edge. But I'm going to place a new one at 2 inches to the center there. I'm going to use the trim tool. S for search, wake up the trim. And what you do for trim is you just drag it over what you don't want. Great. Oop, there's a little extra there. Don't want to miss that. It was a little messy. To fit this to the screen, I can use the fit to window, or you can double click on your middle mouse button. It'll fit everything to the screen. All right, so I want to add an angled line here. Draw it in, and then I'm going to dimension it. That's the horizontal distance between the points. That's the vertical. And this is the true length of that line. And that should be 0.236. Okay, so what are we missing? What's blue? Well, it looks like I haven't defined the diameter. I'll place the dimension for the diameter, and it's 1930 seconds. How do you type that in? You can just type it in, 19 divided by 32, and it converts. What about this angled line? We don't know what angle it's at. We haven't defined that yet. So one thing I do know is I'm going to trim it. And what I would like is a nice smooth transition from this line to this arc. So select the line and the arc, right click, choose tangent. The other method, come up and find tangent up on your toolbar. Both give you the same result. You'll notice everything went black. That means it's fully defined. But so what? Who cares if it's fully defined? Let me show you real quick why it matters. So this dimension, if I were to delete it, and I were to dimension this to 0.3, it should have stayed up above that upper arc or upper edge, and it won't because we don't have it fully constrained the way we want it. And that's why you want to have a fully defined and fully dimensioned sketch. If you'd like to learn how constraints and dimensions work in Fusion, I have some videos linked down below that can help explain that in more detail. Okay, now let's finish the sketch and give this depth. So we're going to extrude this model. We can extrude it either way. Do it 4.5 deep. Great, so we have a sketch and an extrude. Okay, so for some more strategy, what about these holes and should we mirror this? It is basically a symmetrical part, so I would like to leverage the work we just did and not have to start over. I'm gonna go ahead and put the cuts in and mirror it. Okay, so let's use the hole command, S for search, type in hole. One challenge we're facing is getting the right countersink dimension. So I don't know what these are. When I look at the drawing, it's calling for a number 12 screw, a wood screw. So let's figure out what those dimensions are. Well, one way we could do that, insert mech master car, right? We go out and we can search for that number 12 screw. So I'll do a wood screw, number 12, a short one. In this drawing, it has some dimensions that we can use. Great, so we know the outer diameter now, we know this angle, and we know this diameter as well. Great. Okay, so where do the holes go? Okay, now let's do the hole command. So we'll select this face, we're going to put it there. We're doing a countersink straight through a simple drilled hole. We'll go all the way through it, 1/2 inch. This outer diameter of the countersink, 0.438, this angle, 82, and this bottom diameter, 0.216. Okay, so now we have this hole, but what we want to do is start a sketch, and we want to put the points where this is going to go. If you'd like to reorient your design that you're looking at, you can use the view cube. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, make it a little bit easier to look at. There we go. Start the sketch, and I'm going to drop some points. I'm going to do search for point, and I'm going to drag on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll start dimensioning where these sit. So that's 1 inch, and I'm going to line these up. I'll select the two and make them horizontal. These two should be horizontal with each other. These are dimensioned off of each other at 1 1/8. Same thing. And the distance to the edge, 33, 64, 33/64. Great. Are we fully defined? Not yet. Same thing. Now, is there a way to make these dimensions talk to each other? Absolutely. You can actually place it, and then you can double click and select this other, and it'll just immediately map. This one is called D17 in this example. So by clicking on it or typing in D17, you can see now it's driven by a formula or an equation. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about equations, I've got a video in the description linked down below. Check that one out. Okay, so what else is missing? So the height here is still missing. Drag in a dimension of 1 5/8. Sorry, I think I typed in 15/8, right? So 1 space 5/8. There's a little gotcha there. That looks better. Okay, so now that we have these points, what do we do? How do we tie it to the hole? So we'll finish the sketch. And now I'm going to go to the hole command and I can't reference the sketch. So did I do it out of order? Did I mess up? Well, luckily, this is where reordering can be very helpful in Fusion. So you can actually drag this before the whole command. Pretty cool. So let's now right click on the, so I drag that sketch in front of it, and now I'm going to right click, edit the feature. Okay, so now that the timeline is working, I'm still going to bump into a challenge. I'm going to do the whole wizard, but it's not going to want to update and leverage that reference sketch because it's kind of locked into how it's programmed. We actually can now do it correctly, but what's great is it does remember the one that we previously did. So it's got this same information that we just typed in, which is awesome. So we can use it, and we use that reference sketch and those points and hit OK. So what do we do with this one? We can just delete that on the timeline. And there we go. So what did we learn? The order of operations. If you are going to do multiple points with your whole pattern, it's probably worth doing that sketch of those placements first and then doing the whole. But as you can see, there are ways around it. If you forget, you can reorder the timeline. Okay, next, let's do the next component. And what we're going to do is mirror this particular component. If I do a search for mirror, I'm going to need a plane that I'm going to work across because we're mirroring a whole component, but we need a plane right in the middle that we can mirror across. Do we have one? When I look at my planes, mine are over in the corner, so I'm going to create a new reference plane. So I'm going to offset a plane, just like this one, or that face. I'll put it at this point. So we select that point and from the sketch, and it's now putting a plane right in the middle. This plane is what we're going to mirror across. So I'm going to search and do mirror, or do this whole component, and it's across this plane. Great, so now you can see I have two different components. And what do we need to do now? Well, we need to do some cuts and remove some of this geometry on each side. All right, next, what we want to do is this cutout. We want to chop this out. When I look at both sides, the top and the bottom, I'm going to start a sketch on this face. Select the face, hit sketch. There we go. Bring it down, pan it down, zoom out a little bit. Okay, so what I want to do is two rectangles, and Fusion's not sensitive to which one you're editing. We can effectively cut both from the assembly level. So I'm just going to sketch this rough rectangle. It didn't snap into place, so I'll select the line and the edge. I'm going to do a constraint and say that they line up or are the same line. And then I'll give it a dimension, 2.25, and we could then sketch the other rectangle, snap it into place. There we go. We have two rectangles. I'm going to use the Q command. That's the press pull. Hey, let's pause real quick. Before we make this cut on the door hinge, I want to talk about something that was kind of tricky for me to learn in Fusion. Coming from SolidWorks, coming from Inventor, both of them, it matters what state or what component you're in. So for Fusion, it doesn't really matter, but one little gotcha to that is if I were to do a circular cut, I've got two different components. So I make the circular sketch and I want to make a cut. It doesn't really matter where I sketched it. If it's in component 1 or 2, I cut across both. One way to control this is to go over to your cut, choose objects to cut, and choose which body you'd like to cut. So I can turn it off, even though it wants to cut the second body. I hit OK, it doesn't. Okay, another way to toggle this, if you're doing the cut, the visibility of each component or body does matter. If I turn this off, it's now only cutting the one that's visible. I hit OK, and that's the one that gets cut. Bring the body back visibility-wise, you can see it didn't cut it. So let's jump back into the door hinge now. And I want to wake up that sketch so I can actually hide the bodies that I care about for just a second. and reference that sketch. That's one way we can do it. And we actually just want to do one of them. We'll do the first cutout is going to happen to the body that we expose. So I could do it by visibility, but I want to show you a little trick. So because it's cutting two different components, it's wanting to cut them both. I'm going to choose to cut the first body. I'm going to only cut component 1, not this second mirrored one. And I'm going to do it a symmetric cut where it cuts both directions all the way through. Hit OK. Okay, kind of hard to tell. So if we hide that first component, hide the second one, there we go. It did cut it. Terrific. Great. Okay, so let's flip it now, right? So what we want to do now is cut the mirrored component. We're going to use that same sketch that we just did. We'll hit Q. Okay, so we do symmetric all the way through, hit OK, and it cuts it out. All right, let's look at both now and compare. Okay, and it does drag away. Those are looking pretty good. Cool. Okay, so we're almost done. We're almost there. We need to add a boss to that, cut this hole out so it'll fit together, and then add a joint. So we're almost finished. So bring these back. I'll hit undo. Go to my home tab and it goes to this nice isometric view. So what I want to do is I'll hide this body. I'll select it and hit V. There we go. It hides the other. And what about this sketch? I select it. It wakes it up in the browser. I'll hide it. I don't want that in my way. I'm going to start a sketch on this face. A face through a plane, right? And I'm going to start sketching a circle. So I go to the edge, the outer arc, and it wakes up the center. I'll drag a diameter dimension on. It's 1930 seconds, hit OK. Wrong one, my bad. It's actually 5/16. There we go. And we're going to extrude this out. And this dimension should be 2.25. Looks good, it's all the way to the end. Okay, so pulling that dimension from the other model, I know that it's 2.25. I'm going to search for a chamfer and do this squared edge here, do 0.05. All right, so we've got this part done. Let's just finish off the second one and then join them together. All right, so the second component, I'm going to hide the first and wake up the second one. So now let's cut this hole out. I could do that at the bottom. It looks like I probably could use that same circle because it's the same size, right? So I could do that and just extrude the cut. Or if you'd like to put in the dimension, 5/16, sure is. Cut it all the way through. Now we have it cut. Okay, so let's cut out this little squared slot. So we have some of the dimensions from the other model. And what I'd like to do is a line coming off from here at some place. So a line. And I want the line to be parallel to this bottom line. So I'll select both, choose not equal, but parallel. I know the dimension of this line to be 0.252. Okay, so if we then snap this to connect those points, coincident and coincident. There we go. And we're going to sketch to finish this off to make the cut. I'm going to do this full like rectangular cut. Close this out, and this dimension is 0.031. Great, so let's cut this out. And it's a cut, that's the tricky one. Make sure it's going the right way. Let's go the other way. And there we go, hit OK. Cuts it out. Okay, so if I turn off my sketches, so it looks a little more clear. Now toggle the visibility of the hidden component by hitting V. You'll notice one, they just move around, right? So we need to ground one of them. Okay, so if I right click on this component, I'm going to choose ground, and that keeps this one locked in space, and this one now needs to be joined. So let's do the joints. If you'd like to learn more about joints, I've got a joints video that I'll link here at the end. So we can use a special joint today if I do a search for joints, it's called an as-built joint. And what it does is I'm going to select the two components, and the position is here at this center point, and I'm doing a revolute around the z-axis. The revolute allows that movement. We'll hit OK, and now it's free to move about that z-axis. I think this assembly was kind of challenging for a beginner in Fusion. So some of the videos I mentioned is this beginners playlist where you can start from scratch and start building parts, as well as dimensions and constraints. So these are beginner videos for you guys to help you get started. Check those out, and I'll see you in the next video.